lit up under the player card, but immediately softened when he confirmed that there was nothing to refute, then returned it to Kang Ji-yu, who was smiling happily. He lowered his eyes and looked sad, opening his mouth to say how scary it was that people could kill each other for money. Hearing that, her hand trembled slightly, agreeing with Kang Ji-yu. His eyes narrowed dangerously, knowing that Park Hwa-an was lying, because he knew that they were not acting for money and she was talking to avoid letting other players know. After finishing work, she was about to leave when she heard Kang Ji-yu offer to help with this campaign, causing a smile to appear on her expressionless face. Hwa-an politely refused, the reason being that protecting players is the duty of the Hwajiang squad. Kang Ji-yu understood and immediately smiled like an idiot, pretending to understand. Listening to her instructions, he nodded and played his role. When leaving, he did not hesitate to praise Kang Ji-yu, hoping that in the future there will be more people like him appear. Kang Ji-yu could only laugh. 2 more guys coming back from hell would definitely cause trouble for the Earth. Looking at Park Hwa-an's back, he deeply sequenced the data he had collected, and could conclude that this was a secret investigation. Today's hunting session is a bit too much. I'll have to ask Tesu-D to make me a beer to cool my stomach. Yet it took a few days for them to meet at a cafe. Kang Ji-yu even brought Sella along, making Tesu extremely excited to start a conversation. That overly enthusiastic attitude scared me away. Yet, Tesu, the meathead, still had no reservations. Seeing that the girl was beautiful, his eyes were as bright as stars and he rushed to praise her beauty. Kanggu's purpose for bringing Sella with him was so that Tesu could take her hunting at the rank D gate. Leaving her alone in a dangerous place made him a little uneasy. Tesu was also enthusiastic and okay. Then calmly asked a green question. Does sister-in-law have any other characteristics? Causing the 2 people facing each other to blush shyly. Even though Sella tried to explain, Tesu didn't care, looking at the 2 lovers who looked like they were still shy on the outside so I could push the boat for them. Putting that aside for now, Sella said she can buff strength and dexterity, in addition to the main skill of healing. Causing Tesu to marvel for a moment, he also wondered if she could both heal and buff her strength. Sella happily said it was so easy, she even knows how to fight, making Tesu sweat. Tesu excitedly turned to Kanggu and complimented him. This is the best guy in the family who is both beautiful and talented like this. A healer with such terrible skills is a rare commodity. Any big guild would compete to snatch it up no matter what. Suddenly, Kanggu found Sella much cuter. Whenever he thought about the 2 words Tesu's sister-in-law said, his emotions became indescribable. If he already thinks like that, I don't need to bother correcting him. Tesu suddenly burst out laughing happily, drinking a cup of hot coffee like he was drinking beer. Then he slammed the cup on the table, wiped his mouth and said that the hot egg coffee was so delicious that he had to pour the whole cup in at once to get a good taste. Kanggu also ignored Tesu's no-nonsense attitude and seriously asked Tesu to find a few more people to form a team, but he said he had already taken care of that a long time ago. He excitedly told me that he had found 2 quality products that had just awakened for the second time, but were already very strong, and he was sure to be fascinated when he met them. But Kanggu doesn't really believe in Tesu's eyes for people. The evidence is clear that letting 2 cultists on the same team almost ended up in a haunted house. Tesu chuckled and said, "Who doesn't make mistakes?" Then he affirmed that the new people are very trustworthy. "If you're free tomorrow, I'll call them to check." If he was so sure, he temporarily accepted, turned to ask Sella's opinion, then suddenly blushed and shyly agreed. "Because I have to quickly level up to be able to hunt with Oppa." Kanggu next to me continued in a slow tone with a red face. "My safety is the most important thing." The air was filled with the smell of dog rice and went straight into the nostrils of the god Tesu, making him unable to control his heart and fall in love with each other. After finishing the introduction to the end, he promised to meet tomorrow in the west, in Chan. Knowing that Kanggu wondered why he had to go so far, Tesu explained that he wanted to avoid that unlucky gate, so he set the target on the brains instead of the lizard man, making Kanggu's eyes widen in surprise again. The newcomer had already passed the D rank. "Is it okay?" "Maybe it's okay. Fighting against a tall opponent will help everyone get stronger quickly. Moreover, their brains are easier to hunt. and the lizards dive because they don't have to keep quiet like in the swamp. Kangoo's strong argument about the probability of success made Kangoo hesitant. Although he was a bit useless, he was also very smart and would become a great assistant for me in the future. Tesu was shaking and trying to get the last bit of coffee when Kangoo told him he had to go home. What needed to be done on a beautiful day like this? He said the important thing was to quickly level up to prepare for the fourth awakening. As soon as he returned to the D-level gate, he immediately activated his red eyes, as if preparing for a trance, with the power of exploration. With only one level remaining until he reached level 30, the giant red eye appeared again and sent signal waves everywhere, quickly capturing a group of brains standing huddled together. A quick count turned out to be 8 children, perfect for starting the hunting trip. Kangoo did not hesitate but rushed straight towards them, using his blade to pass by as fast as lightning. Before the brain could even realize that it had just been attacked, a red gash appeared on its neck, followed by a scream full of pain and then died away. The brains were destroyed in less than a minute. Kangoo was standing there waving blood from the blade when he suddenly smelled the strong smell of blood. This is not the blood of a monster, but the blood of a human. Inside the gate, this is not unusual. But this time Kangoo couldn't turn a blind eye and immediately flashed straight to where the smell of blood was coming from. A strong smell like this must have been a massacre of 5 or 6 players, most likely caused by cultists. Kangoo finally found the bodies of a group of people piled on top of each other. He jumped down to check the situation. All of them were brutally killed. The magic cult will not kill the player because they have to sacrifice a living person, in the end, who is so brutal. Kangoo thoughtfully speculated that the smell of blood was still there, proving that the culprit was still around somewhere. Looking back at the pile of bodies on the ground to see if he could discover any new clues, suddenly a large figure appeared in front of Kangoo, making him widen his eyes in surprise, staring blankly at the sharp teeth of the monster with one arm dangling out. The monster as big as a mountain roared madly, making Kangoo stunned. Not only was he afraid, but he couldn't understand why this hellish dog was here. The monster continuously roared to show its power, causing sand to fly everywhere and then jumped towards Kangoo as if rushing towards delicious prey. Looking up from below, Kangoo clicked his tongue a few times, then used his sword to slash across the monster's body but could not cut through because the skin was too thick. Kangoo was very angry, but he had to admit that the boss in hell was really different. Before he could think of any plan to deal with the hell dog, it roared forward with its muzzle wide open as if it wanted to suck all the outside energy into its mouth. Then he shot out a huge fireball that flew towards Kangoo, causing a terrible earthquake, causing the entire desert area to be engulfed in a sea of deadly fire. Anyone who is stuck in this situation should practice determining the region of hardship. The hell dog poked its nose around, sniffing to see if there was any charred meat on the grill. The wind quickly extinguished the fire, revealing patches of rock and soil blown into the sky. Kangoo, thanks to the main character's aura, escaped death, continuously jumping high in the air to avoid being discovered by the monster. If you want to fight this thing, you can't use normal weapons. Gritting his teeth, he gathered all the energy in his hand and used the power of the black spear to pull out the extremely hot item that had just killed the boss a few days ago. Nobita swung his spear around like a bamboo pinwheel. He created a tornado that made even Hell's dogs look up. They only saw a black streak streaking across the sky and crashing into its thick skin, blood pouring out like rain, making the monster roar in pain. The moment it collapsed, causing a cloud of sand to rise up, Kong Jiu landed heavily on the ground, tired and relieved, sure he had killed it. Yet less than a second later, he opened his mouth and cursed himself. The monster did not die but became much more agitated. The dog's big and rotten mouth kept roaring, its legs as big as pillars were galloping forward, ready to use its huge body to crush the opponent's intestines. Not willing to be weak, Kangoo stomped his feet, used the momentum to launch himself across the monster's eyes, determined to create an opening to regain the upper hand. Immediately putting force into his legs, he launched a powerful kick that crushed the bucktooth monster's jaw, then flipped several times in the air and fell onto the sand, his body flying several meters away. However, Kangoo was able to brake in time, and made a high jump into the mouth of Hell's dog, exploding demonic energy and releasing power in an earthquake? No, that's his power going up, causing the soil to break into large pieces. The four surfaces shook violently, forming a large sinkhole, causing the giant monster to only howl in despair. At that moment, Kangoo summoned the black spear again, then turned on flight mode, tightened his hold on the weapon with both hands, and rushed down at lightning speed, stabbing the sword straight into the middle of the dog's head. Kangoo clenched his teeth, gritted his teeth and immediately felt the cracking sound of his skull breaking. His entire body no longer had the strength to struggle and fell freely into the giant hole created by the land subsidence. Another earth-shattering earthquake broke out, rocks and soil flew everywhere until only a deep crater remained. But I thought the hell dog was gone, but just a moment later, it still jumped up with the spear stuck in the middle of its head, used its foot to kick Kangoo down, causing him to have to use his whole body to break. I couldn't keep my composure on my face anymore. The Demon King was once again attacked by his hunting dogs without missing a beat, but I was afraid that Kangoo had only lost his strength. He was as stubborn as a hellish dog. It glared at Kangoo with bright red eyes. Even though he was breathing heavily, he knew that this animal was more than capable of continuing to struggle with him. And Kangoo also knows that just that spear is not enough to defeat the beasts of hell. Seeing its fierce aura, Kangoo couldn't help but remember the day he returned to hell. This demon was always as hot as ice cream and very difficult to tame. Suddenly the sand under the hell dog's feet rose up into its rolled-up pants, then cracked as the bundles of flags on its body were expanding. Soon fire came out from there, embracing the monster's entire body like a giant torch. Like a giant meteorite that knows how to use lightning speed, the dog rushed forward with a move to kill Kangoo. But to Kangoo it is just an unreasonable hellish dog, nothing more and nothing less. Kangoo takes a stance and uses his fist to summon real ghosts from nowhere, activate Ba Format's divine power, and buff his own muscle strength. Sensing the unusual energy, the hell dog quickly braked to assess why the opponent in front of him had stopped so strangely. His face lit up, his pupils were white as if in a trance while his whole face was shaking. Your fortunes are wrinkly together. Not giving the monster time to turn its tail and run away, Kangoo unleashed a thunderous jawhook that sent his body weighing hundreds of tons flying high into the air. The monster roared in pain and struggled in the air, then fell heavily and hit a bag that kicked up dirt and sand into the dust. Kangoo was so tired that he was breathing heavily. This pet told him that his strength was terrible. With his current magic power, he couldn't use two powers at the same time, so the battle lasted so long. While in hell, Kangoo fought with this species many times. Now it's time to let it return to its ancestors. The monster was beaten to pieces and still stubbornly raised its head, then fell flat on the ground, accepting its sad fate. Kangoo gave him a disgusted look. You're really annoying. At that moment, the system suddenly displayed a notification that the player had successfully destroyed the C-rank cracked fragment, leaving him confused. Regardless of whether the player understands it or not, the system sends a series of high-value rewards. Kangoo was stunned by his new knowledge. What kind of pants was the slightly cracked fragment, or was the word crack used to refer to hell? But that's not what he should be concerned about right now. The important thing is why the hell dog is inside the gate that needs to be found out. They couldn't have used the weapons of the 7 emperors from hell to come here. Kangoo thought about it and couldn't understand it. If applying a skill is too difficult, we will skip it and move on to checking the remaining notifications. His eyes lit up because he saw a huge reward this time. Most notable is preparing for the 4th awakening. He received the A-rank magic control attribute, which allows him to control magic more quickly and at the same time erase all traces of magic on other creatures. The joy was doubled, so Kangoo decided to celebrate with a hell dog, hastily activating his insatiable hunger and thirst to absorb magic power. His face showing cruelty, Kangoo hissed and laughed with pleasure. If he can regain all his previous strength combined with leveling up, maybe his power will be even more powerful than when he was in hell. After eating a full meal, Kangoo happily walked out of the teleportation circle with an extremely satisfied look on his face with today's hunting session. It's time to go home and eat Kim Crush soup as well. As he was dreaming and was interrupted by a voice, Kangoo looked around and saw a figure that looked familiar. Even though the baseball cap covered his face, there was no way to hide that bright red hair. Anyone else but that cheeky girl at the hair salon the other day. Chae-eun-jo slightly lifted his hat in a dangerous expression. Surprised old man. Kangoo was not at all happy with this reunion. It even lessened his excitement. Furthermore, the two of them are not close enough to waste time saying hello. Even the guy didn't know how to get out of the way so he could go home to his wife and children. Chae-eun-jo thought his father was still bitter about what happened at the restaurant, so he slowly walked forward and introduced his name to him. Hearing the three words, Chae-eun-jo, Kangoo woke up. This name was so familiar, he had definitely heard it somewhere before. Memories of the day he took the ability test flashed back to Kangoo's mind. Isn't this the name of the president of the 5 largest associations in Korea? What's more, Chae-eun-jo smirked proudly. This lady is the president of the famous Red Rose Gang. Kangoo finally understood why she was so strong, but still didn't understand why this girl came to him for. As soon as she finished speaking, Chae-eun-jo grumbled and read all of Kangoo's personal information. Born in 1995, raised in an orphanage and never adopted. When he grew up, he moved out and had no news for 5 years and then suddenly appeared again as a false awakening. Am I right? Kangoo looked warily at the woman in front of him. After investigating so carefully, don't say he was in love with her. Chae-eun-jo pulled out her phone and read it like a machine. Even the day he registered as a player, she knew it in the palm of her hand. Also mentioning the embarrassing S rank in the first love evaluation made Kangoo's face darker than soot. He's a bit angry. Chae-eun-jo was smart, so of course he thought it was a technical error, because the level of his power growth was so terrible that it was too unreasonable. At first Chae-eun-jo thought he bought his identity from a criminal, but all the fingerprints matched previous records. Hearing this, Kangoo is a bit scared of ghosts. Where did she get her fingerprints? Chae-eun-jo was also kind enough to explain that she took it from the player profile registration area, and it turns out that guilds have such great power. How does Kangoo know how capital works today? After 9 steps of investigation, Chae-eun-jo determined that Kangoo was not using a fake identity and closed the phone. She stared at Kangoo with extremely intense eyes, declaring with certainty that he was indeed a great blueprint with outstanding talent, perhaps stronger than any of the guild masters, including It's Me. Suddenly being complimented was so unexpected, so Kangoo didn't know how to react, but it felt like this cat had been wandering around the 3 kingdoms forever. Koreans, not Hanoians, can pretend like that, right? Chae-eun-jo was caught silent for a long time, and finally agreed to go straight to the point. As the president of the Red Rose Society, she wanted to become Kangoo's sponsor. Mrs. Tu offered to take care of him, but his face remained frozen. Then he burst out laughing, surprising Chae-eun-jo. The reason was because his father had the illusion of being confessed to by Chae-eun-jo. Hearing that, she jumped up. What the hell was this scabby toad thinking? After 10 more lifetimes, she would have thought about that. In rural times like this, we just need to smile confidently like Kangoo. Everybody. Putting that nonsense aside, Chae-eun-jo explained in more detail about the support. Red Rose would provide financial support to help him level up faster. But Kang Ji-yu was joking and teasing, so he had to repay the favor by helping Chae-eun-jo play the game like last time. Hearing that, her anger that she had been suppressing for so long suddenly broke out. Her hair stood up and she looked like a female devil. Okay. In 2 seconds she chanted the spell that she was the guild leader. Be professional. Be professional. Seeing his grinning face, she wanted to get angry so much that she tried to hold back, losing the game just because one guy immediately accumulated AD and AFK to eat instant noodles with 2 eggs. In addition, Kangoo was still unreasonable, deliberately mumbling to Chae-eun-jo. The bronze rank seemed a bit low. After teasing people, Kangoo returned to the main story, not understanding why Chae-eun-jo wanted to sponsor him. Letting out a breath, she said because she saw his potential. She was just a player who had just awakened 2 weeks ago but had leveled up at an amazing speed, especially playing solo from gate E to gate C will definitely go even further in the future. To help Kangoo speed up the leveling process, Chae Eun-jo will lend him a free card to enter and exit gates below rank A. Kangoo nodded with excitement but didn't stop there. She continued that if he wanted to form a team, Red Rose would choose the best people to team up and reduce taxes when selling magic stones through the association. There were so many benefits that Kangoo had to slow down. Listening to Chae Eun-jo continued to talk about being provided with genuine equipment like a cow. Except for high-level weapons that needed a deposit, the rest were free to use. A house and a car will also be provided for free. As long as you are good, you will get everything. Hearing this, Kangoo gradually became suspicious. Was this treatment real? Is it possible that this batch is secretly multi-level? Understanding what he was thinking, Chae Eun-jo immediately said that this was just a little investment for the future, but Kangoo still found it somehow suspicious. Of course, in this world, no one is sure of anything. Chae Eun-jo's eyes lit up, announcing that the exchange conditions for those things were when the guild had a Kangoo mission that required them to participate. It turned out that he had been luring me for this purpose. He held his chin in thought for a moment and then asked for details about the mission. However, the response to the question was terrifying silence. It took a long while for Chae Eun-jo to force out a sentence. Now was not the time to know. Seeing her pull the hat to cover Kangoo's face, he didn't ask anymore. If the task was too difficult, he would refuse later. A hand suddenly reached out in front of Chae Eun-jo. That hateful guy had accepted her offer and was smiling extremely mischievously. The corner of Chae Eun-jo's mouth automatically curled up, finally successful in hurting the chicken. Hi. Kangoo's hand was about to fall off, so Chae Eun-jo reached out, happily slapping his hand and making a deal without even having a contract. A brief high five helped the friendship between the two sides increase significantly, successfully making a temporary red-haired ally. Thinking that after finishing the mission, Eun-jo would immediately turn around and say that her current level was not enough to be known. The smile disappeared from Kangoo's face when he pointed at himself and told her not to underestimate the president, and the ending was wrong. It took a few seconds to make her spit it out. No one asked, "Why did she say that?" In my head, I silently cursed the arrogant bastard, but on the outside, I turned a blind eye and pretended to follow along. Yes, I was appalled. She had to say that she hadn't assigned him the task, not because he wasn't strong enough, but because Eun-jo's group hadn't collected enough evidence yet, so she couldn't say it arbitrarily. The convincing reason caused Kangoo to have no choice but to retort. While he was in a daze, the phone hit him in the face, asking for a phone number so we could contact him. Hands typing numbers, eyes turned to Eun-jo. Kangoo wondered when he would get equipment because he had to have good equipment to quickly increase his magic power. Putting the phone in Eun-jo's pocket, she turned around and told Kangoo to come with her to the association's headquarters. Seeing him naked, she had to scowl and exhale 3 words. Only at Seoul Station did he agree to follow. A moment later, all the eyes of passers-by were focused on one car. Even a kid thought that car was so cool. That is the trendy Porsche 918 Spider-Man, parked on the road, attracting all eyes around. Kangoo couldn't help but marvel at how delicious he looked, and was even more surprised when he saw the flowing red hair sitting in the driver's seat. Wow, the president pretends to be poor, and the ending of the real-life version of Raising a Poor Guy is him. The first time he sat in a luxury car and was met by a beautiful girl, Kangoo was a bit confused and asked how much this car cost. "It's only about 10 million won, but it's not much," Chae Eun-jo calmly replied. "That's not even the same amount as the odd number in her account." After hearing this, Kangoo's eyes and nose widened. Suddenly he saw that Eun-jo was also very pretty and adorable. But he still couldn't believe that this shabbily dressed, carefree girl sitting around in a restaurant actually owned a nice luxury car. Those people in poverty are all underground rich people. It's really impossible to imagine them by looking at them. Eun-jo stepped on the gas pedal and sped away, feeling as smooth as gliding on water, making Kangoo unable to help but feel too slow. Eun-jo was extremely satisfied with that expression, happily told him that if he liked it, she would buy one as a souvenir. Suddenly the 2 words "Dwang's mother" rang out, causing Eun-jo's smile to fade and her face to stiffen. Kangoo was looking at her with sparkling eyes, constantly saying to the rich lady, "Please take care of me." It made Eun-jo's skin get goosebumps. Her face wrinkled as if she had been constipated for weeks. She looked so stressed. Kangoo knows how to control it, but Eun-jo is still angry and vomiting blood. She became angry and threatened that if he dared to refuse or fail the mission in the future, she would immediately confiscate it. Why is the top server so exhausted? If you give as long as you want. Just when Eun-jo was about to retort in a dirty manner, he told the driver that he would shut up and not tease her anymore. The car stopped in front of a towering building, painted red, both luxurious and modern. Getting out of the car, I looked up at Kangoo speechless. It was as big as the player support center. It was so cool. There is also a huge silver rose logo attached to it, shining in the sunlight, showing off its wealth. In Kangoo's heart, he held a party to celebrate for himself when he made a wise decision and saw that the gang had come to capture him as his cousin. He followed Eun-jo inside and immediately saw two people waiting. One of them quickly approached and held out his hand in front of Kangoo, bowing slightly and introducing himself as Park Yun-hoo, head of the Sphinx Department of the Red Rose Society. As soon as he shook someone's hand, Kangoo's eyes met with a tall, muscular scar-faced man, full of anger. Introduced as Commander-in-Chief Moon Dong-ho, he was using bullet-shaped eyes to shoot straight at Kangoo, his face wrinkled like a monkey's ass, looking like he had no sympathy. On the contrary, Yun-hoo welcomed him extremely warmly, vehemently welcoming Mr. Oh Kangoo to join the association. But this god guy was so sarcastic. Let's be honest, you guys are not from a multi-level association, making Yun-hoo laugh and say that this guy is so funny. She even offered to take Kangoo to get equipment, but was held up by the president because Yun-hoo was even busier than her. Just as he bowed his head in thanks and was about to leave, the taciturn scar-faced guy suddenly said he would go with the two of them instead of him. Suddenly Yun-hoo was so hospitable and had to widen his eyes and ask why. Seeing that Dong-ho was having trouble glaring at Kangoo, he wanted to judge for himself what kind of ability this guy had. Kangoo's ears were itchy, but Eun-jo didn't refuse, saying that the two of them would work together in the future, so it was fine to get to know each other now. They all got into the elevator and stopped at the 15th floor. Kangoo followed behind Eun-jo, with that big guy next to him. She scanned the fingerprint to open the item warehouse door enough to make Kangoo's eyes light up. The law also reiterates that if you want to borrow high-level weapons, you must pay a deposit. His eyes lit up like a child looking at a toy. Kangoo suddenly wondered if the legendary equipment wasn't here. Are you drunk? If we have it, we can use it. Why keep it here? Kangoo glanced over and continued asking, so does your guild have VIP items that are higher than the other two levels? As soon as he heard Eun-jo's laughter saying yes, Kangoo immediately asked how much he had to pay. Hearing the discounted price of 50 million won hit his hand, Kangoo quickly turned away to avoid letting others see that his face was frozen. Poor dude like Kangoo didn't have that much money, so he could only silently cry goodbye to the girls. Just as he asked the president to take him to see the high-level equipment, Dong-ho's footsteps suddenly sounded loudly, making them both confused and turned around to try it out. I don't know who poked him, but Dong-go's whole body erupted with terrible murderous intent. His eyes glittered extremely scary. He gritted his teeth and asked him to speak properly. His face showed nothing more than annoyance. Dong-go hurriedly walked forward and looked down with his face full of blue veins, probably intending to use this scary appearance to scare Kangoo. But no, baby, he just smirked and smiled contemptuously. How about challenging something your dad doesn't like? As Dong-go's anger grew higher and higher, his hand tightened on the hilt of the sword at his side. The crazy blood began to rush to the top, making him unable to control it anymore. Dong-ho lifted the sword to smash Kangoo's insolent expression. The minute the blade was about to hit his face, a scream that shook the entire space rang out. Familiar red hair was clearly visible on the shiny blade. Her hand tightened around Dong-go's sword, trembling angrily and asking this damn guy, "What the hell are you doing?" Eun-jo got angry, her eyes glaring as if she wanted to devour her subordinate, making him tremble in fear and stumble, unable to say a word. He shuts up and makes the red-haired mother even more mad. She reminded her in a high voice. Whoever this young man is, don't poke your nose into it. Kangoo listened silently as she lectured her henchman, and didn't bother to say anything when Dong Ho's sword quickly fell from his face. After cursing her subordinates, Eun-jo turned to warn Kangoo not to speak casually and watched Dong Ho beat him until he's crippled. He turned away and said a few words so he could see her complaining behind his back. This group that looks like it's full of short-circuiters has a highly loyal team and is definitely not weak. Dong Ho turned his back, but his ear just touched the word, Mrs. Eun-jo, causing the discomfort to suddenly rekindle. The story is that Kangoo over there is smiling crookedly, asking his mother to be pretty. Dwang doesn't need to give him the car anymore, he just needs his mother to lend him special equipment. Thinking that he was about to borrow something delicious, a punch came from nowhere and landed on Kangoo's head. Dongo's angry face suddenly appeared. He gritted his teeth and hissed, "What the hell did you just say?" But Kangoo just stood there with a blank face, causing the dog's blood inside Dong Ho to flare up. He rushed forward with his window-shaped body, his face distorted and scary, crazily swinging his huge sword and hitting the ground with a powerful blow. Dong Ho's eyes turned extremely wild when he realized that the bratty Kangoo was still standing there, sneering at him. And the 1,000-pound sword was stopped by one hand. Eun-jo, who was now glaring at Dong Ho, "Have you forgotten what I said?" There was someone to protect him, so Kangoo happily smirked. Meanwhile, Dong Ho was confused and didn't know how to explain to his boss. She swiped Dong Ho's sword away, causing him to lose momentum and fall to the side. Kangoo continued without saying a word when he saw the big guy being lectured by the president. What's even more interesting is that Eun-jo might actually take action if her subordinates disobey her, not just talk nonsense. Dongo was speechless when he heard the president's cold words. "If you cause trouble again, will your general combat commander listen?" Is the hot-blooded guy calmed down? Eun-jo turned to explain to her guest, hoping he wouldn't mind, then returned to the previous equipment story. He picked up the sword and prepared to leave, but Dongo's ears were still stuck on the detail that Kangoo was asking Eun-jo to give him a set of armor that was both comfortable and had excellent basic functions. Interrupting again made Eun-jo look at her in surprise. Dong Ho just lit up with enthusiasm and only had his armor if he defeated him. Dong Ho stepped forward with his hands wrapped in energy. Che Eun-jo angrily walked towards Dong Ho with strong steps, making this person afraid of falling, his hands and feet trembling. Her eyes didn't leave him while her mouth said a few words. "Why don't I tell her to go away?" While preparing to feed the employee who refused to listen, an arm suddenly stretched out to block it, causing both Eun-jo and Dong Ho, whose souls were deeply hurt, to stop. Seeing that Kangoo confidently wanted to participate in the match, Eun-jo nervously passed by with a suspicious look. It's true that Kangoo has a lot of potential, and the future is probably even more developed than me, but Moon Dong Ho is no less competitive. Currently he is at level 67, the god of war plows with all his efforts and is preparing to enter his 7th awakening, on par with the top players today. Eun-jo thought that Kangoo had real talent but was just a budding seedling, so she quickly stopped the reporter from provoking Dong Ho. The corner of Kangoo's mouth curled up with excitement. He already had my heart, so why wouldn't he be stupid enough to take it? Dong Ho nodded in agreement but furrowed his eyebrows, secretly calculating in his heart that he must let him know what a festival was. Looking at the president worrying about that careless guy, Dong Ho was extremely upset. In Dong Ho's eyes, Eun-jo is the savior of life who sweated to save him from death. From that moment on, Eun-jo was the teacher to whom Dong Ho swore loyalty for the rest of his life, and most importantly, the woman who captured his heart. Yet that son of a bitch dared to disrespect such a wonderful person. Just thinking about that made Dong Ho's anger flare up like a volcano erupting. A moment later all three of them entered the training area. Vast expanse of red roses. Eun-jo was still whispering vehemently in protest, but Kang Ji-yu didn't care at all because he was busy squirming and warming himself up. Seeing this guy as stubborn as an ox, Eun-jo gave up in frustration, shrugged and told him he would regret it anyway. "I had to stand by and watch and then call an ambulance for this idiot." Before entering the official match, Dong Ho generously allowed Kang Ji-yu to go 3 seconds ahead and could fight however he wanted. Hearing that, he only half smiled, dismissing that idiot as having learned from some cheap swordplay movies. Seeing Dong Ho still standing still like a statue, Kang Ji-yu became increasingly annoyed and told him to stop acting cool and quickly draw his sword. Dong Ho still maintained his polite appearance, saying he didn't want to use all his strength to hit a new soldier, making Kang Ji-yu give in to his mother. If he wanted to do that, there was no need for him to refuse anymore. Suddenly crouching low, pouring magic into his legs and immediately activating Flash, Kang Ji-yu rushed in front of Eun-jo's eyes, gently turned around and kicked Dong Ho in the stomach in confusion. Eun-jo, standing outside the fight, saw her fighting cock thrown dozens of meters away, roaring in pain and spitting everywhere, where Dong Ho hit his body, revealing a shattered piece of it. He fell face down on the ground and vomited a disgusting amount of green and yellow bile, while Kang Ji-yu landed gently. Eun-jo was stunned speechless, looking at Dong Ho who was breathing heavily, his whole body trembling and holding his stomach endlessly. If it weren't for this armor, I would have died. He clutched his stomach, coughing continuously. His hand unconsciously reached out to pull out his sword and pounded it hard on the floor to stay steady. Kang Ji-yu was just waiting for that, letting out sarcastic words, thinking he was giving me the first 3 seconds. Have you already regretted something? Dong Ho used one hand to heal the wound and the other hand fiercely grasped the sword. He raised his neck and asked what trick Kang Ji-yu had just done. Stronger is stronger, so why bother playing tricks? Dong Ho still insisted that Kang Ji-yu had just been overbearing. A player who had been playing for 2 weeks could not be this strong. Dong Ho thought he was being played, so what kind of system was he giving in for 3 seconds? Kang Ji-yu covered his mouth and giggled, not hesitating to criticize Dong Ho for acting too much, and when he was defeated, he blamed his opponent for playing dirty. You are truly a clown. Kang Ji-yu roared and laughed like crazy and then immediately returned to his cold face, emphasizing each word with a strong voice, giving up and going straight to defeat. Dong Ho had never been humiliated like that before, extremely humiliated, his face frowned, his teeth gritted. Turning to the right, he immediately saw a familiar figure. How could the goddess see this miserable defeat, determined to regain the upper hand? He quickly tightened his grip on the powerful sword, lifted it and spun it around, majestically pointing the sword up to the sky and unleashing his ultimate technique, destroying the sword, creating a giant column of energy that shot straight up. Suddenly, a soft laugh rang out. Dong Ho frowned when his performance was interrupted. Kang Ji-yu on the other side was smiling with his eyes wide open, laughing at the name of the heavenly swordslayer. He was truly a country boy. There were only a few idiots. I just came up with such a cheap name. His eyes flashed with a devilish, blood-red light. Kang Ji-yu jokingly asked him if he really thought that was cool. That hateful disdainful attitude made Dong Ho so angry that he turned his sick jaw and immediately turned around to attack and shouted angrily. He had to beat this bastard to death before he could be satisfied. Seeing that he made no move to surrender, Dong Ho carried his sword and rushed forward like a giant beast flying quickly to devour his prey. Kang Ji-yu coldly assessed him. He was indeed the general commander of one of the 5 major guilds. His strength was also terrible but not strong enough to fight him hand to hand. His hand quickly summoned the power of darkness, opening a black hole on the floor. At that moment, Dong Ho chased over, holding his sword in hand, ready to slash down. Wherever his big, strong legs ran, the floor broke. The black hole Kang Ji-yu had just summoned was spreading out, reaching straight to the tip of Dong Ho's shoe, but he was too hasty to notice. Eun-jo on the sidelines of the battle screamed in panic when she saw her subordinate's blade about to split Kanggu's head in half. While he was extremely excited about setting a huge trap, the moment he jumped up, Eun-jo quickly rushed out to stop him, only to discover that Kang Ji-yu had disappeared behind Dong Ho. I was in tears when I saw my opponent suddenly disappear right before my eyes. While looking sideways, a ghost hand grabbed Dong Ho's shoulder, making him stiffen. Ahihi, you idiot! Kang Ji-yu completely suppressed Dong Ho, activating his water wave power, causing his whole body to smash into the wall in front of him. The commander-in-chief, respected by thousands of people, was falling down with a pile of rubble, finally falling with a thud, officially becoming a loser in Eun-jo's extreme surprise. She cautiously glanced back with sharp eyes as she watched Kang Ji-yu smugly brush off the dust on his body. She said she was strong but still refused to believe it. Immediately after that, the rescue team quickly arrived to give first aid to Dong-ho's grandfather, who was suffering from numerous injuries. Eun-jo kept saying sorry and promising to fire Dong-ho as a deterrent, but Kang Ji-yu didn't care about those words, because all his attention was focused on this new product. Galway armor belongs to a special rank, with extremely impressive physical and magical defense stats. Not only that, it also possesses a very powerful skill, allowing players to double physical defense within 10 seconds, but can only be used once per day. It's true that genuine goods are different. Kang Ji-yu smiled and couldn't close his mouth. He secretly glanced back to see Eun-jo sighing deeply, probably regretting this equipment very much. I only blame the boy lying on the stretcher for daring to bet on this thing. He just took the reward he deserved. But I thought it was his fault, so Kang Ji-yu freely said a few words for him. Let it go this time, but if he did it again, he would unilaterally terminate the contract. That noble spirit made Eun-jo extremely admire him, promising that from today all the members of the Red Rose Union will respect him. Kang Ji-yu reluctantly agreed, because he was busy studying the huge shirt. He asked Eun-jo if there was a miniature flashlight, but if it was this big, wearing it with faith. She immediately pointed towards the nearby platform. I will be the one to thread the needle and thread for you later. Kang Ji-yu okay always put the things on there, then waved goodbye and walked home. Eun-jo didn't even bother to say goodbye, only reminding him to send her measurements. The door closed in front of her before she let out a breath. In the end, what kind of god is this guy? Just 2 weeks after awakening, he has already filled his face with onions for a general commander. At this rate, Kang Ji-yu will soon climb the international rank, not just in Korea. Currently, the world has the top 8 strongest pseudo-awakeners called rankers at the peak of fame. Up to now, Korea still does not have any rankers. Even Baek Kong-yun, the top 1 Korean server, has not been able to reach the international level. Can Kong-gu's turn be possible? While deep in thought, the door suddenly opened. As soon as head of human resources Manhwa walked in, he immediately asked if the news of Dong-ho's expulsion was ready. Eun-jo just coldly said that tomorrow she would hold a meeting to discipline him and send him away, to show off those who were hostile to Kang Ji-yu. Hearing that, Manhwa felt sad and regretful for a talented person who, just because of a moment of impulsiveness, spent thousands of years in vain. His sad expression made Eun-jo have to remind him that everyone who did wrong would be punished equally. The higher he held, the more harshly he had to be punished to set an example for everyone. Manhwa bowed his head in agreement, then said he had something to announce, making Eun-jo's eyes turn cold. A government spy has successfully infiltrated the cult. If everything goes well, it's only a matter of time before we catch them. Hearing that, Eun-jo's hands became flustered. She looked upset, scratched her head, and asked her younger brother to explain in more detail. Returning to Kang Ji-yu, after leaving the Red Rose headquarters, the street lights were on, but he didn't dress up to set fire to the street, but stood on a corner of the street to check his information. Currently, Kang Ji-yu is a Stage 4 Awakener, with uneven skill stats, magic power of 53 but intelligence of only 11, which means he has no brain. Kang Ji-yu carefully considered that even though magical power was the most important thing, that didn't mean that strength, cunning, and organization wouldn't help. If he could strengthen his body with stats, he could avoid consuming too much magic power. Although intelligence and wisdom are useless to Kang Ji-yu because he has no magic power, looking at his scores is boring and unbearable. Too sad to not be able to add points to the stats he wanted. Kang Ji-yu breathed a sigh of relief, hearing rumors that from the second awakening onwards, skills that are used more will have more stats increased. Yet his magic power does not change, while other skills increase randomly. Is it possible that my magic power is too strong? Kong-gu's magic power is much higher than other stats, he can also do things other players cannot do. Furthermore, the higher the stat, the harder it is to increase points. After up level 30, Kong Ji-yu realized the truth. He would no longer be able to increase his magic power because it was already too high. Luckily, he surpassed the KPI thanks to the three-headed dog. Although it's a pity that he can't increase his magic power, if he keeps going in this direction, the fifth awakening will come soon. Kong Ji-yu lazily twisted his bones and joints, suddenly remembering his appointment with Tetsu and Sella. Tomorrow will be a busy day. The next day at Gate D in the east of Incheon, in the middle of the bustling stream of people, Tetsu's bellowing voice rang out. He happily waved his hand and howled, causing Kong Ji-yu and Sella to walk over embarrassed. As soon as he saw idle Tetsu asking around, he was extremely upset. It wasn't until he said he had brought a new player that his facial muscles began to relax. Tetsu excitedly pointed to the two people standing next to him and began introducing them one by one very professionally. This handsome guy is Kim Si-hun, and this cute girl is Chai Eun-bai. Si-hun smiled and nodded slightly in greeting, causing Kong Ji-yu to admit that he was indeed a Mainam. And Eun-bai in the middle was getting angry at Tetsu, because this big guy dared to call her a kid, and immediately samming his body to look like a U40 boss, deeply hurting the weak Tetsu. She turned her bright eyes towards Kong Ji-yu, burst into laughter and immediately complimented Oppa's temperament. He was so happy to meet him, he liked it very much, Allah Bell. This excessive enthusiasm made an introvert like Kong Ji-yu startle. He was about to return the proper greeting when he was interrupted by a scream. This cute pink-haired girl is a healing mage, right? Eun-bai excitedly invited Sella to make TikTok, leaving the rest of the men speechless. Kong Ji-yu sweat dropped when he saw that this kid was like a female version of Tetsu, equally stupid and senseless. Si-hun came forward to greet him, briefly introducing himself as a level 12 warrior, skillful at flex, who had just awakened a rank trait not long ago. The hyperactive girl taking the photo is a B-rank witch. Underneath that witch's appearance is an extremely great power. Kong Ji-yu burst into laughter when he heard that. It's quite a polite young man who knows how to say this. Does he have mind-reading magic or how does he know what he wants to hear? Above all, the A-rank awakening ability is extremely impressive, along with the beauty that makes women ovulate. Kong Ji-yu happily shakes hands with him, secretly admiring that this guy is as perfect as coming out of a comic book. From afar, Tetsu saw Kong Ji-yu concentrating on checking the goods from head to toe, and happily asked him if he was satisfied with these two people. A satisfied smile appeared on Kong Gu's face. Indeed, looking at them, they were not as cunning as the Andros bastards. Who would be prepared to fight monsters and still stand there taking pictures loudly? Tetsu happily bragged about how he had sharp eyes, causing Kong Ji-yu to remind him that he almost died because he was betrayed by his teammates. Does he have eyes for evil people? Tetsu shyly turned away and tried to look extremely cute, boldly saying that it was fate that wanted us to be together, brother? Looking at Kong Gu's expressionless face with sparkling eyes, Tetsu awkwardly pointed at the group of people busy filming TikTok, asking if this group was strong enough. Kong Ji-yu hunched his chin and nodded. This formation is okay, a tanker, a warrior who attacks directly, a witch who attacks at long range, and a magician who heals and buffs strength. Not to mention that in the group there are 2 A-level awakened people. The rest are also at B rank. This team is used to support people, not monsters. This lineup made Kong Ji-yu extremely excited, declaring that he would accompany his brothers today to point out the shortcomings and help everyone find a way to overcome them. Hearing that, Tetsu roared with happiness and was so happy, it made Kong Ji-yu want to take back what he had just said right away. In a cold voice, he reminded him that he would only participate if there was a dangerous situation, so everyone had to try their best not to be careless. Because Kong Ji-yu did not want to carry them too early to avoid causing dependence, if he wanted to get stronger quickly, there was no other way but to fight directly. The 4 people were filled with enthusiasm and headed towards the teleportation gate, ready to show Kong Ji-yu their awesomeness. Gate D this time is a forest where the brains reside. As soon as they smell the player coming, they come and howl wildly, their plump bodies holding damp weapons running towards them, splashing water everywhere. Oh my god, this human. But before they could do anything, Tessu used her shield to stop them, causing them to lose momentum and crash into each other and fall to the ground. Tessu proudly smiled and challenged the group of idiots whose whole body was shaking and scratched as if it had been run over by a truck. While they were crawling and trying to escape, Bai unleashed a terrible lightning bolt that struck them all. Even though she was focusing on grilling meat, Bai still discovered the enemy behind her and immediately warned Tessu that there were 5 little boys coming, so that her big brother could promptly rush to the rescue. Slamming her shield into the ground, Tessu let out a roar that attracted the enemy's attention. The shield suddenly glowed, blinding the eyes, and the brains rushed straight to death like moths. Tension tightened the shield, preparing for an extremely intense impact. At that moment, Sella released the light blessing skill from behind, a powerful source of energy covering Tessu's body. Just a few seconds later, her muscles were buffed to full strength, making Tessu's confidence increase even more, happily thanking her sister-in-law. Sella didn't have time to play chess with him, but was busy using her archer skills to shoot down her opponents. The arrow cut through the wind and rushed straight towards the chickadees. After being buffed, Tessu also took full advantage of his power, quickly repelling all the brains in the blink of an eye. Victory clearly visible on his 40-year-old face. With a strong shield blow, the entire group of brains were sent flying away. Before they could understand anything, they saw a sudden blast appear in the middle of the siege, making them scream in pain. The 2 brains sat on the ground holding their bloody eyes, not understanding what had just happened. The trump card Si-hun has officially launched his attack, his hands continuously swinging swords as fast as cutting, his body dexterously weaving through the stinking monsters. The sword swinging towards his head is always there. In less than a minute it was gently resolved. Si-hun didn't even shed a drop of sweat. He glanced back to see Tessu coming, constantly praising his excellent swordplay ability. Si-hun shyly scratched his head and said he was just practicing, but looking at the pile of neatly cut bodies, Tessu understood that this guy was just being modest. After everyone had gathered, Tessu looked up at the leader hanging on the tree, eagerly waiting for him to praise the group for doing a good job. Yet Kongu remained silent, causing the men below to be extremely confused. To avoid wasting more time, he immediately jumped down to say a few things for everyone to improve. Oh no, it has to be a bunch of things. Kongu's eyes cooled a bit, making the whole group look dumbfounded as they listened to him analyze each person's strengths and weaknesses. The first person on the floor is stupid Tessu. He has sharp senses and knows how to distract monsters. His problem is that he is too reliant on his strength, which leads to wasting too much energy. He doesn't carefully observe the situation and jumps to the front line. What if the river boss comes out from behind and is a human? To block their attacks, you just need to endure their attacks and block them, that's enough. The next person was Sella. When she heard Kongu call her name, she was startled, holding her breath while listening to the slightly worried assessment of her performance. Kongu praised Sella's good judgment when buffing Tessu's power, but criticized her for using light arrows to attack because the enemy always pays attention to the healer. If you also attack, Tessu won't be able to distract the monsters, easily leading to the whole group dying. Sella lowered her eyes sadly and said sorry, making Kongu howl to comfort her not to cry, slowly correcting it and then turning to comment on Bai. You don't need to attack monsters that are already injured, using magic spells with such great firepower. Because you were too focused on them, Bai didn't notice the 5 brains behind her. She could easily defeat them with a single strike of lightning magic, so she had to conserve her strength more. Don't forget that Si-hun is the main attacker, your job is to support him. Bai attentively absorbed every word Kongu said, determined to change next time. Finally, Si-hun was extremely worried and looked intently at Kongu, only to see his face blank and not saying a word. Quietly walked over and patted Si-hun's shoulder and praised, you did a great job, there's nothing to criticize. Kongu was completely surprised by the ability of this grandchild. Even though he did not have 10,000 years of fighting experience like him, he still fought well, truly a talented youth. Hearing that, several teammates couldn't stop exclaiming, and at the same time asked to be better so that next time they wouldn't be compacted again. Kangoo believes that Si-hun is a rough gem that, if polished properly, will shine even brighter than now. After giving their suggestions, it was time to see how everyone applied them. Kangoo suggested that the group continue to advance deeper into the forest. Everyone did exactly as he said. Tesu no longer impulsively rushed to attack but obediently acted as a shield for her teammates. Eunbi uses her lightning to stun opponents from afar, while Sella uses her magic to buff the entire group. The rest of the attack was up to Si-hun alone, only to see the lightning flash and the slash of the sword overwhelm all the mines in a few short minutes. This visible progress made Kangoo temporarily satisfied. If they continued like this, they would probably be able to get to Gate C within a month. Tesu's iron pounded heavily on the ground and asked excitedly, "The brother saw how we combined." Kangoo shrugged and spit out 3 words, "It's okay. Don't praise them too early or else you'll be too subjective and give up without even trying." Suddenly, there was a noise coming from nowhere, causing Kangoo to roll his eyes. These earth-shaking footsteps were definitely not those of the brain. Then his eyes suddenly widened in surprise when he realized a white-furred monster just like a starcat was rushing straight towards this direction. It ran and screamed hysterically with bloodthirsty red eyes ready to tear apart its opponents. This one was not a cat but a werewolf. It saw Tetsu being big and fat and meaty, so he rushed towards that direction like crazy, while he was so surprised that he just stood there with a dumbfounded face. When he came back to his senses, he saw the werewolf diving towards him, roaring loudly to show his strength. Tetsu couldn't run in time so he had to hold the shield firmly in his hand to prepare to dodge the attack. Kang Ji-yu stood on the tree, his blood rushing to his brain. How could the demons in hell flock to this place to travel like this? Just as he activated the blade in his hand, he was about to shoot it down when he heard a sound. A pitiful roar sounded below. Si-hun reacted quickly and rushed to the rescue in time, giving the werewolf a painful slash to block its attack, not forgetting to remind his teammates to stay away. Because the werewolf was injured, he lost his momentum and fell straight towards where everyone was standing, while Si-hun had time to jump back to avoid being swept away. When the monster crashed into the tree, the hand tightly gripping the hilt of the sword flared up with powerful energy. Si-hun jumped and left a slash across its stomach in the blink of an eye. However, he didn't have much fighting experience, so from the blind spot he was knocked down by the monster. It took the opportunity to jump towards Si-hun, preparing to press its foul mouth close to his face. Si-hun lost his momentum and could do nothing but raise his sword across his face and curse the green beans. Kangoo appeared on the contrary like a god with thousands of pounds of strength, gritting his teeth and launching a landslide punch, narrowly saving Si-hun from death, leaving him extremely shocked. Kangoo knocked out the snake and lay flat like a shrimp on the ground. The system pops up and says that thanks to defeating another D-rank crack, he has increased 1 level. But Kangoo ignored them and turned to the other side to help Si-hun stand up, but because his muscles were so big, he thought he was choking him. At that moment, the remaining people rushed over. Teshu was completely overwhelmed by Kangoo's terrible strength. The 2 remaining women were very worried about Si-hun who was coughing on the ground. Teshu quickly helped his life-saving benefactor sit up so Sella could heal, teasing Si-hun a few words to help him feel better. Meanwhile, Kangoo looked at Si-hun with thoughtful eyes. This guy could actually fight hand-to-hand with demonic beasts. Even if he awakened at level A for the 2nd time, this was still unusually strong. This is more than genius. Now Kangoo understands how that bastard Moon Dong-ho feels. On the other side, Si-hun had just finished being injured when he was stupidly picked up by Teshu, looking guilty. Fortunately, Kangoo stepped forward in time to help Si-hun, making him feel grateful. But Kangoo also had his own purpose in doing so. The hand placed on Si-hun's shoulder secretly activated the exploration power, and at the same time used the power of a rank A mana ruler, to hide his mana. Then scanned Si-hun's body from top to bottom. Everyone, don't think that Kangoo is a pervert and is planning to check out the guys. He just wants to check if this guy has any hidden powers. With the new skill, Kangoo can also see Shihan's information panel. Wow, that's great. He smiled sinisterly with his eyes wide open to see how strong he was, but suddenly his face stiffened. What kind of shorts are these, folks? Just reading the first line, I felt a shock. Shihan awakened for the first time with the title of the successor of the martial saint of rank SSS. He was chosen by an outstanding martial saint soul with the power of a hero to save the world. Kangoo felt embarrassed and looked at Shihan. Could it be that this guy with a milky face is really the main character? Please wear a helmet with me to avoid the author changing the main male lead. Kangoo calmly read the information again. Shihan was protected by the god of war Chantehon, so his swordsmanship was so superior. Kangoo worriedly glanced at Shihan one more time, wondering if he had appeared from the beginning until now just to be the background for this kid to show up in a big way. In the future he could become a big threat, but he couldn't miss such a precious gem. Kangoo wants to have a good relationship with Shihan by supporting him as much as Che Eun-jo did. However, he can also turn around at any time. Who knows, maybe one day a sword will be pointed at him. We cannot put all our trust in this relationship. Even though Shihan looks quite trustworthy now, even sacrificing himself to save Tae-soo, to be positive, he's quite okay. Moreover, with that harmless handsome face that was still planning to try electric massage, Kangoo didn't think he would surpass him easily. Only the author knows how things will turn out. Suddenly, Kangoo's eyes flashed coldly. His familiar, gradually losing humanity smile slightly raised as he gradually sank into his personal thoughts. Is Oppa Kangoo injured? Seeing the corner of his mouth move up and down like a seizure, Sola kindly asked, interrupting his train of thought. The remaining people are trying out the thrill of Eunbi's massage. Looking at Tae-su's face, you can't understand how satisfied this hung is. Kangoo distracted Sola by saying he was busy thinking about the werewolf, wondering whether its meat was as tender as pork or not. When asked about Si-hun's health, the doubt on her face disappeared and she said he was much better. As long as you avoid strenuous activities, you will recover quickly, but if you stick with Tae-su's father like that, it's not certain. Kangoo walked up to Si-hun and asked again. Hearing him say he was much better made him feel reassured, but there was something a little strange on his face. Not paying any attention to that because Si-hun's eyes were sparkling, thanking Kangoo for saving his life. Even though he had heard Tae-soo talk about him a lot, this was the first time he had opened his eyes like that. Of course, Tae-soo next to him roared with bright eyes like a dog meeting its owner, flattering Kangoo to the sky, making Si-hun admire him even more. Seeing that, Eunbi was also speechless. Looking at Tae-su's appearance of losing all her dignity, she could only give up. After praising Kangoo, he went to Si-hun, wondering why Si-hun didn't join the big guilds. Heard that the Mir Guild was also recruiting new members. For some reason, just hearing that name Si-hun trembled and quickly turned around to block Tae-su's throat, telling him that he preferred the freedom he had now. So he hoped his friend would stop mentioning this issue. Please. Hearing that, Tae-soo suddenly felt guilty but still stubbornly asked another question. Is there any conflict between you and the Mir Association? Si-hun had to restrain himself from pulling out his sword and slashing this idiot. Tae-soo realized that he was a bit stupid and immediately knew his fate and bowed his head and apologized profusely, making it extremely difficult for Si-hun to laugh it off and say it was his fault. Just too sensitive. At this time, the anger had calmed down somewhat. To avoid further unnecessary problems, Kangoo dispersed the group and went home. Specifically told Si-hun to go home and rest to regain his strength, ignoring the god's insistence to continue killing monsters. Kangoo told him to rest well and go on his own adventure in the jungle tomorrow. I'm not going anywhere tomorrow. Tae-soo didn't ask. He always refused, making him sad and sad. His face didn't look like he worked hard and never met his lover. The group followed him out of the gate. Once outside, Kangoo dialed the phone and told Sella to go home first because he still had work to deal with. This missed call must have come from that person, so Kangoo needs to go now. Before leaving, Kangoo also told her that she wouldn't be able to come back for dinner today, making the girl's face look disappointed. But she didn't complain a word, and said that no matter how late, I will warm up the food for you. Hearing that, Kangoo was so happy, there's nothing better than having someone always waiting for you to come home. Even though I really wanted to have dinner with her like always, today it wasn't possible. Waiting for Sella's shadow to disappear behind the crowd, Kangoo smiled. His fun has only just begun. Kangoo went to the bus stop where Si-hun was attentively scrolling through his phone, thinking vaguely about the Mia Guild when he was interrupted by a voice. Kangoo said he had something very important to tell him, so he wanted to go somewhere more private to confide easily. Si-hun also agreed without any doubts, spending the entire bus ride waiting until he got to the stop to go with Kangoo. The two kept walking until they entered a dark alley, and Si-hun wondered what this older brother wanted to talk about. At that moment, Kangoo turned around and gave Si-hun a painful punch. He was extremely shocked, his eyes widened, but he threw his hand away and fell to the ground. Si-hun scrambled up and didn't understand what this guy was having. Why were we so sweet in the afternoon and so cold and heartless in the evening? Not giving Si-hun a chance to resist, Kangoo used his knee to hit him straight in the middle of his chest, defiantly saying he just wanted to make sure. Because he knows Si-hun's future is extremely open, he will definitely become a classy awakener. It's possible that he'll be able to force his male lead role, so he decides to preemptively attack. The side character who has SSS's dick is so dangerous, so I wanted to build a relationship with him a little bit. No one wants to create a relationship that puts their head on someone's neck like that. 202. Kangoo smirked and pressed his face down to emphasize each word. I just want to be your true ally. His crazy appearance scared Si-hun to death. Is there anyone who would make an ally like this, bro? Kangoo's hand full of magic suddenly penetrated through the shirt, poking straight into Si-hun's chest, causing him to turn up in pain, his eyes white as if in a trance, while Kangoo diligently stirred his chest hair. When he reached Si-hun's heart, he immediately activated his dependent power to capture most of the bad boy's heart. Si-hun's whole body trembled. He immediately asked for forgiveness but failed, only feeling that there were strange changes happening inside. Kangoo said in a colder tone than the underworld, Si-hun will forget everything that happened here. When he wakes up, his life will still go on as usual, hunting monsters and becoming stronger. As before, Kangoo kept whispering to his hand as if he was mentally manipulating him, saying he must form a team with Tetsu and Sella to become a stronger team than everyone else. With the power just now, Si-hun can also use part of Kangoo's strength because he has now become his close spirit. It's so precious that I'm sharing it for you to use. Si-hun lay limp on the ground breathing heavily after Kangoo withdrew his hand from his chest. His body was as clean as new without any wounds or holes at all. There is only Kangoo with red eyes and a devilish smile. We are two but one. We will definitely become bloody brothers. A moment later, Si-hun's eyes widened in horror. Sweat drenched his face, completely unable to understand why he was lying down in this dark alley. Putting my hand on my chest to calm myself down, I looked around wondering where I was. I was obviously waiting for the bus. It's now 8 p.m. Si-hun clearly remembers that he was still at the bus stop about an hour ago. As for what happened next, he couldn't remember anything at all. The more he thought about it, the more his headache became, making Si-hun convinced that this was an aftershock left by the werewolf's attack in the afternoon. Blaming himself for being weak, Si-hun gritted his teeth then angrily tried to sit up and promised to become stronger. The faces of the Mir Guild's people suddenly appeared in his mind, especially the bastard vice president Kim Yeong-ho-ohn. His hands tightened and he slammed into the wall, his face filled with extreme resentment, vowing to put his sword to the necks of those bastards so he could eat and sleep well. While Si-hun leaned heavily on the wall with his hands and feet, the system announced that the soul enslavement had been successful. Kim Si-hun has officially become Kangoo's subordinate, forcing people like that, but Kang Ji-yu raised his hand to refuse when the system asked him if he wanted to give orders. The corner of his mouth curled up cunningly. Now Kang Ji-yu just had to sit and wait for Si-hun to get stronger. Right now, Kang Ji-yu doesn't want to give any orders to that handsome kid because he has to wait for Si-hun to get stronger before he can do anything. It is expected that with this momentum, after his abilities are enhanced, Si-hun's strength will be equal to Balak's. His development is very important to Kong Ji-yu because he still has to fight against the evil demons of paganism, while his magic power is still sealed. They can appear at any time, so Si-hun, I will help you out, so please practice hard and get stronger. Kong-gu's eyes glowed with the fire of ambition, looking no different than a pervert stalking his prey. At that moment, his phone announced that Andros's name Koryak Yun was calling, just in time. As soon as he heard Kong Ji-yu say hello, Gorh Yun quickly reported that he had discovered traces of magic power. But it seems that what I discovered was not created by humans but by those monsters. Hearing that, Kong-gu's mind immediately jumped to the devil's number and coldly told him to quickly explode the address. As soon as he heard about the rank B gate in Ui's Ambu, Kong Ji-yu immediately reviewed the order. After the Hell Dog and the Werewolf, there was now another one, all of which were collectively called the Rift Fragment. The Hell Dog appears in the C rank gate, the weaker Werewolf appears in the D rank gate, so if this one appears in the B rank gate, it must definitely be a ferocious beast. Kong Ji-yu licked his lips with excitement, like a hunter finding his favorite prey. I wonder how many levels it will help him increase this time. Based on the parameters on the system board, he guessed that the fifth awakening would come earlier than expected. The next morning, Kong Ji-yu took the earliest train to Ui's Ambu station. After jostling on the train for a long time, he finally arrived. The heat was exuding all over his butt, making him want to buy a car as soon as possible. After this, he would definitely have to ask his mother Eun-jo to buy one for her. After exiting the ship, Kong Ji-yu woke up and overheard the conversation of two players. They had to return because they were not allowed to enter the gate, but they only knew it was because a mutant monster appeared. At the rank B gate, the situation is extremely chaotic. Awakened people from all over are not allowed inside. Extremely dissatisfied with this incident, a blonde guy stood up and demanded an explanation, let alone a mutated monster, who could easily go home. At that moment, an announcement was sent through the loudspeaker, saying that the monster in the gate was a mutant species, currently unrecognizable, but up to 10 people had died. For the safety of the remaining players, the government will close the gate until it has enough information. The number of deaths was so high that the crowd began to worry about leaving. Kong Ji-yu was sure that the mutated monster must be a magical beast roaming the dungeon. Having made it this far, it must be very strong. I don't know what species it is. The reporters asked the guards to explain further, remaining silent and saying nothing made the people extremely worried. Poor guard, he said he didn't know, but he kept getting asked. The reporters kept taking him far away, and finally revealed that this monster looked like a lion. Because I had never seen anything like it before, it took a lot of time to analyze it to determine whether it was corn or potato. That day, Kong Ji-yu suddenly realized that this was indeed Boer. It is one of the strongest predators in the second level of hell. Looking like a lion and having 5 legs as described by the other brother, it also has a different characteristic compared to other magical beasts. It only eats 5 prey a day regardless of size. Boer will be full abdomen and will not attack first unless threatened by others. Remembering the scene in the past when Boer and his group went down to the first floor to find food, Kong Ji-yu suddenly felt so nauseous that his face turned blue. According to the words that just came out on the loudspeaker, 10 players have been killed, meaning the Boer has been inside for 2 days. Kong Ji-yu smirked quite a bit. Today's hunt is so easy. Just throw it 5 monsters. Wait until it's full, then skewer it to death. The crowd of fake awakeners began to leave, with nervous eyes and confused smiles. Kong Ji-yu calmly picked up the phone and immediately called Eun-jo's sister for help, forcing the girl who was lifting 150 kilograms weights with hemorrhoids to answer the phone. Rumor has it that Eun-jo is very close to some high-ranking people, so Kong Ji-yu asked her to just call so he could get inside. A bang rang out on the other end of the line. Eun-jo got mad and suddenly went in there. Why? It's easy to help, but the fee is a bit high so I can't pay it. After Kong Ji-yu promised to pay in full, Eun-jo agreed and told him not to die at the hands of mutant monsters. Kong Ji-yu then held out his phone in front of the guard, happily telling him that the Red Rose president had something to say to him. This grandchild was so surprised that he started sweating, not expecting to have such a great honor. The reporter smelled the juicy news and immediately pointed the huge camera at Kong Wu, while the soldier was seriously listening to the phone, continuously wondering. After talking for a while, he sighed and allowed Kong Wu inside as the investigator of the monster incident. If you defeat the monster, you must provide information to the government. He was fine while surrounded by reporters. They kept pointing cameras at him, looking like an A-list celebrity. From behind, parting the crowd of people coming forward, a guy with blue hair walked noisily. Kong Ji-yu turned his head slightly and saw a group of 6 people dressed in sleek clothes approaching, with blue hair on their heads, looking very cheeky. Weakness. As soon as he showed his face, he pointed at himself and introduced himself as Kong Sung-soo from the Mia Society, asking to investigate with Red Rose. The crowd of lovers immediately whispered that this person was a recent rookie. Even though he had only been a player for 3 months and had already entered the rank B portal, Sung-su's arrogant attitude made Kong Wu a bit uncomfortable. Besides, this guy just likes to rush up to him. Sung-su's eyes scanned him once and then praised him for being a good person. But don't you have any teammates? Sung-su mocked Red Rose for being so rich that she could only finance this much. I thought that would anger Kong Wu, but unfortunately he was still very young and green. He smiled widely and said that he preferred going solo, so he didn't want to join any group. Yet the Mia Association's group still refused to stop there. They looked down on Kong Wu, who only hunted at the C-rank gate and dared to show up. Sung-su leaned close to his hand and said, "Guys like you usually die very quickly." His eyes narrowed cunningly, and he scolded Kong Wu for being just a cheap guy who couldn't even take a step into the clouds. "You're a bit cheeky for a guy who just woke up for the 4th time." Seeing Kong Wu silent and not saying anything, the green-haired girl happily thought about wrapping her arms around his neck, extremely pleased with the illusion that he was scared out of his wits. Kong Wu's eyes became darker and darker. The danger was silently radiating, but the idiot Sung-su did not feel it. Sung-su excitedly pointed to his group of 5 dark-faced brothers, luring him to join so they could protect him, but if he went solo he would die. But Sung-su's team already has all the positions. He only pretends to be kind to insult Kong Wu. So know your fate. It's best to join the bandits and lick your wounds. The corner of Kong Wu's mouth slightly raised and released the words "okay," forcing a genuine smile, saying he was so touched that he didn't know how to react properly. Her sincere attitude makes the blue-haired girl difficult to understand. I didn't think he would be that easygoing. People just invited him to play without actually intending to invite him, but they agreed to join the group as if they were real. He narrowed his eyes and urged everyone to hurry or be late. Making the remaining Mias mistakenly curse this guy without knowing if it's humiliating or not, they agreed to be polite. Kong Ji-yu flashed a cunning smile as he walked past the stupid people. 1, 2, 3, 4 years were just enough to be bait for Boer, but the blue-haired guy would soon be beautiful. 30 minutes earlier, Sung-su had just seen Kong Gu's face peeking out at the gate and immediately called Mia's vice president, Kim Jang-ho-ohn. So, you have to take the opportunity to humiliate that guy in front of everyone. Even though Red Roses have the upper hand, the Mia Association still holds higher on the rankings to show them what a festival is. Sung-su innocently followed the vice president's words and intended to humiliate Kong Ji-yu, but he didn't expect that this thick-faced guy would want to go with his group with an extremely friendly attitude. If people are like that and still try to beat them to death, the press here is afraid they will laugh in the Mia group's face. Sung-su made a quick decision, had to suppress his anger and wait inside the gate. I had to turn back and tell my brothers to quickly follow Kong Ji-yu. So suddenly there was news that Red Rose and Mia were working together, causing a big stir. Sung-su and his teammates watched uncomfortably as her husband poked Kong Ji-yu in the back of the head, silently cursing the son of a bitch 10,000 times. I don't understand why Red Rose would sponsor such a worthless guy, but after thinking about it, Sung-su happily smiled happily. Once inside, there was no need to waste enzymes to provoke a coward. Just wait inside and everything will be over. If Sung-su can laugh, Kong Ji-yu can also laugh, but he will never see the plans he has planned for him. Behind the teleportation gate is a hallway as dark as a cracked hole. Kong Ji-yu walks behind to watch the brothers and sisters join forces to defeat the monster. Yet his good intentions were only responded to with a spittle, which Sung Soo spat on the ground with the curse, "Are you stupid? Now that they're here, they don't need to act anymore. Constantly making excuses, and Kong Ji-yu is just a weak guy. What's so special about this guy that Chae Eun-jo chose for himself? Maybe that mother's time is over." Having dethroned the Red Rose, they had to flatter Mia. They all competed to praise Kim Jeong-ho Vice President Kim Jeong-ho as the true love of life. Not only is he handsome and has a lot of money, but he also has a father who is the president of the association and is extremely rich. Who is like that Red Rose Association with tattered clothes and tight clothes that only accepts trash people? Kong Ji-yu silently stood in the dark listening to their discussion. He had already learned a bit about this drama-filled meeting. Kim Jae-yun is the president of the Mia Association, as well as the president of Korea's leading electronics corporation. 5 years ago, he and his son Kim Jeong-ho woke up after an accident at the gate. With huge financial resources from the electronic network, Kim Jae-yun quickly leveled up and established a social group. Therefore, the members were extremely pleased. Their clothes and equipment always had to stand out. The color of flowers and chives is like the bunch in front of him. Kong Ji-yu also wanted to swim in money, so he thought about whether he should poke the wheel so that these two groups could fight each other, and then become a profitable fisherman. Greed rose so strongly that Kong Ji-yu had to quickly extinguish it. Eun-jo was still supporting him with all her might. "We have to save more money. Only stupid people kill the goose that lays golden eggs. Furthermore, red roses are still valuable." Kong Ji-yu tried hard not to laugh out loud. His red eyes looked at Sung Soo in front. "If you want to kill someone, just hide in their name." After walking around in the dark hallway for a while, the green-haired girl lost patience and screamed because she couldn't see the monster. Kong Ji-yu smiled stupidly. "Let's do another round, my brothers," making Mia's group even more disgusted. Do-mei is truly the type of idiot who is stubborn and difficult to train. Listening to them planning for the red rose to wither sooner or later, Kong Ji-yu still played the role of a dumb kid and didn't say a word. When they no longer paid attention to him, he activated his exploration power over the entire corridor. The radar waves traveled like a storm, and soon caught movement right behind the wall, mouths drooling from hunger. "You guys must be wandering around looking for food, right? Kong Ji-yu smiled happily and let me deliver the food to your mouth." Kong Ji-yu used the energy in his hand to release enchanting power, from which an extremely attractive fragrance flew straight to the meeting place. They sniffed and sniffed to wonder what the fragrant smell was, but no one thought about the reason why this fragrance suddenly spread. Kong-gu's eyes narrowed sinisterly. This was Boer's favorite smell, so it would come here soon. Very quickly, all of Mia's group got into their fighting positions, arrayed in attack, defense and support positions, and were very familiar with being in formation, so they quickly got to work. As for Sung Soo, he still did not forget to confront Kong Ji-yu, who asked him to stand still and watch with open eyes as the Mia group showed off their strength. Kong Ji-yu burst out laughing. His prediction was so accurate, making Sung Soo frown, not understanding what madness he was in. "I only saw the smile and evil eyes light up, and the cowardly appearance just now had completely disappeared." Kong Ji-yu excitedly hissed that guys like you usually die early. While Sang Soo was distracted, a loud noise erupted. The Mia group's tanker was hooked by something and dragged away right before his teammates' eyes. Startled, Sang Soo looked in that direction, frightened and speechless. A monster with a lion's head and a long body like a lizard was perched on the wall. The older brother, who was holding his index shoulder to block the attack, was hanging from Boer's sharp claws, his body constantly trembling. That horrifying scene made the crowd below stand still. The fiery fighting spirit from before had disappeared. Boer up there is opening his mouth wide to take in today's first prey. Kangoo craned his neck in apparent amusement and started counting the numbers for him. He lost one. Sung Soo ignored Kangoo and quickly commanded his team members to attack. The magician summoned a black spear and launched it straight at Boer, who was noisily chewing meat. but it suddenly disappeared in space. Not even a hair was anywhere to be seen. All I could see were clouds of smoke, dust, and rocks being thrown in all directions. In the blink of an eye, Boer had jumped to a safe place out of the Mir Guild's attack range. Sung Soo was bitter about losing his prey and reminded everyone to maintain their formation and prepare for a second attack. Before he could do anything else, he saw his teammate next to him being pierced by claws. Sung Soo was stunned as he looked at the monster's big, strong teeth that were eating delicious human flesh. He screamed and cursed the beast, no longer paying any attention. Kangoo hid on a high pillar and mumbled the number 2. Sung Soo got angry and started spinning the weapon in his hand. When the energy reached its limit, he stopped and stabbed the stick into the ground, creating a huge source of blue mana that tore off the monster's head, causing it to howl pitifully. Sung Soo took the opportunity to immediately order everyone to wipe up and quickly take advantage of this golden moment to finish off the monster. The remaining 2 were rushing up to attack following Sung Soo's command. Suddenly, with a bang, only the green-haired one was left standing between his 2 claws. The rain of bloody blood poured onto his face, causing Sung Soo's eyes to look up in horror. Boer was roaring loudly with 2 preys hanging in front of him, making Sung Soo suspicious and pretending to ignore him. It's obvious that he's used all his strength, but it still doesn't do anything. Why? Team Mia now only has 2 members left, but this blue-shirted motherfucker is considered a quitter. Looking at that bloody claw, she has completely lost all fighting ability. Kong Ji-yu grinned, full of joy. That's already 4 names? Sung Soo couldn't rely on his teammates and could only grit his teeth and sweat like a shower. Determined to defeat the beast alone, the short man emitted extremely powerful purple energy, then shot straight up in a few short seconds. Putting all the essence of his strength into the next attack, Sung Soo held the spear and rushed straight down on the monster's head. He used all his strength to unleash the lightning attack.